going to take you through the Stamps Away bookbinding stitching frame. This is a really handy piece of kit if you're into making multi-signature books. So what I mean by that is a proper full-size book. So we're not talking the little pamphlets that we've been making before, we're talking almost like a novel-size book. So things with lots and lots of pages. And this is quite a traditional tool in the fact that it's based on a medieval type of binding. When I was learning bookbinding at college, we did it the way where you took a strip of fabric and you stitched your signatures into that. It was notoriously tricky, they came out crooked, but this tool makes it nice and easy so that you can make books of all shapes and sizes, out of all sorts of things, you know, so the world is your oyster. You know, so you can make teeny tiny ones, or you can make larger ones with full-on spines, or you can have decorative spines. You know, let's celebrate what we're creating. So let me take you through the tool to begin with. It comes ready built, it's flat packed to a degree, and basically when you get it, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to lift up that bit, so that is your stitching frame, and then there's a little hole on the side, and when you push, out comes the little drawer that has got all your gubbins in that you're going to need. It's got your little adapters for doing ribbon, it's got your twine ones, it's got your pegs, it's got your thread anchor point, okay, which is that one, and you've also got an additional piercing guide, which is done to line up perfect length for the frame itself. So all of these fit perfectly in this drawer, and when the drawer is in and shut and the top is down, you've got a little lug that keeps that in place, so when you're carrying it about for bookbinding on the move, it's all safe and sound. So it's really handy. I also keep my needle in that drawer as well, so that everything's together. Right, so how easy is it to set up? I'm going to turn this so you can see what I'm doing, and I'll talk you through what we've got. So I'm going to set it up for using with twine first, because I really love this is very much a gothic bind, so even if you're doing an exposed spine, it's a nice one to work with. But if you're doing a covered spine like this one here, and I don't know how well you can see that, but you've actually got the texture of the twine through the spine, and it just gives it that really nice oldie worldy feel. So I would have to say twine is my favourite to work with. But this could be a decorative twine. You know, I use garden twine just because I love it. So let's make a start. So I want some twine. Okay. So let me talk you through. You need your twine anchors, so to speak, and the main thread anchor, which works for both ribbon and twine. So you only need one of those, and it just depends which way around you're going. And I will need some pegs. I'm going to do 3 twines, so I need 3 pegs. Okay, so first things first, cut some lengths of twine. Okay, it's got to be longer than there. I'm probably going a little bit too long, but that's fine. I tend to go quite long because then once I've got my book stitched, it gives me the option to wrap around and tie the book up and things. I don't have to make that decision now. Okay, so we're just going to loosely tie our twines to the large hole. Then that pokes up, and you take your peg and you pass that through, and that now holds that in place. Okay. So I'm going to do 3. I'm doing an A5 sized book, so I'm just going to work in the middle of the frame, and this is where you want to evenly space these so that you're going to have a nice, neat, even, neat spine. Okay, so you've got these holes beautifully evenly spaced. So as long as I leave the same number of gaps between, it means that my threads are going to be evenly spaced. The thing to consider when you're doing these kinds of binds is, do you want to just have the twines holding your book, or do you want to have decorative stitching? There's all sorts of different options that you can do. But I'm going to actually have, like I have done on this one, I don't know if you can see that, if I come here, see I've got 2 threads here, and then I've got an anchoring stitch top and bottom which are decorative. So I just need to, make sure that if this is the size of my book, I've left spaces at the end here. Okay, these are all little things that you'll play around with, but this is basically getting it set up. So you will be doing this without having to worry about can a camera see you. So there's a little slot right along the back of the backboard here, and your threads pass through that. Your thread or your ribbon passes through that, so that when they're in place, they are flush to the back of this board, which means that they are going to sit nice and comfortably against the spine of your book, which is where you want them. Okay, so those go through there. So obviously when you're doing this at home, turn it around so you can see it comfortably. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is pass these through the holes here. So, and it will be the same hole as it is on the top here. Right, doing this back to front is so much fun. So just pass that through. I mean, depending how you work, I'm just lining this up and looking at it. But if you like things to be really precise, you could actually number your holes along here, and then you'll know that hole 5 is where the thread's coming down, so then you can number them on here as well. But I tend to just work by eye, but I know that the gap between them all is 2 holes, so I've done the same on there. And then this is the bit that's a bit tricky when you're working back to front. There is another slot underneath here that this anchor fits into, so that the threads are all snugly under there. Can you see that? And then you can just give them, you can tie these off if you want to. I tend to not tie them off because I can just work quickly and get a book made. But if you were doing a huge book and you'd got 10 strings coming down here, tie them off so you don't have to worry. So my frame is basically ready to go now. All I need to do is prepare my signatures. So your signatures are your collection of pages that you've pre-folded. Now, I folded these in half, but obviously you don't have to. You can make these any shape, any size you want. But what I need to do now is know where to mark my holes. So, I need to mark on my piercing guide. So, on my piercing guide, I can line it up at the edge of the book, and then I just want to make a little mark on the piercing guide of where a string is. So there's a string there, a string there, and a string there. So I know I need to have holes in my book there. Can you see that? So there was a string there, a string there, and a string there. And I also, because I want to have a nice decorative anchoring stitch, I also want a hole at the top. And I'm marking pencil on my piercing guide because I can rub it out when I've done. Okay? So I now know where my holes need to be, and by doing it on the piercing guide, it means every signature is going to have its holes in exactly the same place. Because I'm just going to put the piercing guide in my signatures, and then where I've put those marks, I'm making a hole. Okay, I'm just using my needle in my cradle. So now I've got the holes, can you see that? exactly where I want. So that's one signature done. And I'll get another one. And I'm lining my piercing guide up at the end. So all the holes are going to be in exactly the same place. So that's the second signature done. Third one coming in. Now these should all have even number of pages in, but this one feels a little thicker, so I'm guessing I haven't counted my pages. Take a couple out. So I just sit and fold a load of pages up. And you can then add your decorative edges. I mean, obviously I'm using copier paper, but this could be something that you've printed out. This could be a story. You know, all sorts of different things you can make. But just for demonstrating, I'm just making a little plain notebook. Tea stain pages work nicely. You know, lined paper works nicely. Cartridge paper, you know, kids' sugar paper. Anything that you can... And mix your papers. Because you're stitching them together, there could be different thicknesses. You can also use decorative papers on the fronts of your signatures. So if you look at this one, the front page of each signature is a printed paper, and then, you know, it just gives the book a nice look on the spine. Okay, right, so I've got 4 signatures. That's enough to show you what you need to do. So I've got my thread and my needle. I'm going to take my first signature and I'm going to start at this end, and I tend to start on the outside and come in, but you can start on the inside if you want to have things hidden, but it's quite nice to have a little trailing end there because it just means you can do decorative knots and add things in. Leave your trailing end, and then you're going to come out of the next hole. And you can see the needle is coming out right by that twine. So the whole point here is I want to capture that twine with my stitch. So I'm going to come back in the same hole I've just come out. But obviously, because that twine is sitting close to that edge there, because of the way it is in the frame, I can then pull that in, and that's going to grab that twine. Okay, and then going to go to the next hole, which, because I've used the piercing tool and I've lined it up, is right by that twine again, and I'm going to capture it. You're not stitching through the twine. You will be able to pull these twines about and manipulate them. You're not stitching through the twine, you're grabbing it with the stitch. So it's just going round it. Okay, next one. Okay. And the first one always feels a little bit loose, and you'll notice that my hand is on the inside here, so it's in the middle part of the book, so I can see what's going on. Okay, grab that. So again, it's caught there, so that's starting to hold in place. I'm going to come out of the last hole. Okay, now when you're doing a twine capture like this, you don't go back the other way on the same signature. You pick up your next signature. So I'm on the outside. I'm going to come inside onto the next one. Okay, and you grab it, pull it nice and tight, and we will tighten these up more as we're going along. Okay, on the first couple of rows, while things are getting into place, you'll find that it might be a little bit wobbly either way, but as you build up, you start to stitch through and capture things so that it will hold it nice and snugly. Okay, and we're just going to go back, doing exactly the same thing, coming out of the hole, around the twine, back in the hole. So I tend to, if I'm doing this one and I'm wanting this to be exposed so you see the twines, I tend to go with a nice contrasting thread so you can see it. If it's going to be covered up for that sort of aged look where you cover it with some faux leather or some nice fabric or something, doesn't matter what colour thread you're using. But as I tend not to make my mind up until I've gone all the way and made the book, I tend to work with a nice contrasting sort of pretty thread from the word go, because then if I do change my mind and want to have an exposed spine, it's fine. Make sure that traily end that we had at the start, because obviously that's not anchored yet, so we're going to come through there, back out of this hole. So now we're going to start actually sort of capturing that trailing end, so we can either do a little decorative knot or add a stitch. I'm just going to do a knot just to secure that. So these two signatures are now secured together and the twines are joining them, holding them together as well. Okay, and then it's just a case of grabbing the next signature, going in. So all you have to remember is each time you come out of a hole, make sure you go back in the same hole, capturing your twine. And also, when you get to the end and you're starting to go up a signature, working up the stairs, so to speak, you want to make sure that you just get an extra little bit between the two. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So let's just quickly, you'll soon get into a rhythm. And because I'm holding this down, I'm making sure these are fitting as snugly together, and sort of gravity's helping you, because I'm not pushing these down with any great pressure. I'm just holding it in place with my hand, which is keeping the pages open, which makes the stitching easier, but also means that my signatures are nicely spaced and neat and tidy and all lined up. So I'm coming to the end here, which is where I would then get ready to go into the next signature. But before I do that, now I've got multiple ones here, I'm just going to capture the thread behind the previous stitch, so that now instead of just one thread between each signature, it actually puts an extra one. It just holds the top of your book a bit tighter and a bit neater. You don't want to slack top on your book. Okay, and then it's just a case of carrying on until you've got all the signatures that you want in your book. And it's you soon can add 10, 12 signatures in very little time. I mean, this hasn't taken me long, and already we're getting, you know, a decent thickness of book here. Okay, so I'm just going to go along. I'll only do 4 signatures because, you know, it's a bit like watching paint dry, me going backwards and forwards along here. But it is very repetitive, which makes it relaxing. And you're not overly, because the strings are hanging right down the back of that spine, I'm not having to think, I've got to make sure I capture that, because you go out the hole and back in, it will almost automatically capture it for you. Okay, and then again, when you're at the end here, before you pass up to the next signature, you just pick up and just add that extra. So you end up with like a little chain stitch going along the end, which is really nice. So you would carry on. Once you've finished putting all your signatures in, it's a case of just releasing your tabs, pulling out that little anchor at the bottom there. Okay, I tend to keep my needle on while I'm doing this because I might want to add some little decorative edges in a minute. Untie these. This is why I only loosely tie these, because I don't commit to cutting any strings until I'm 100% sure what I'm doing. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, so just take those off. So it will look a bit weird to begin with because you've got all these excess bits of twine here, but can you see you've got a nice tight chain going there, a nice pretty chain there. So how we get. I'm going to fold this down so you can see. So, what can we do now? Okay, we can leave these long so that your book can be tied. You can put just a plain cover on there and attach those over, a bit like I have on here. In fact, I plaited these first, and then you can see that spine exposed. Or, a little harder to see, but this is the same book. Exactly the same. Underneath there, you might be able to hear my finger bumping up and down there. That has got twines. So all I've done is taken 2 pieces of cardboard for the front and back cover. Probably show it easier on here. So, front and back cover. And you glue the strings tightly across onto the hard cover. And then a little bit of decorative ribbon or material or leather goes around the end to hide and encase your spine, and then it gives you what you would traditionally recognise as a hardback book. Or just attach your covers and leave your spine exposed. I do like this particular look because you don't see all the stitching. All the stitching is hidden on the inside, so it almost makes the book look like it's floating. Once you know what cover you're doing, you can then trim off any excess of your twines. So, I don't have favourites, but that is one of my favourites. You can have multiple twines. So there, that's got 9 going. And actually for that one, I used the ribbon slider because I could get multiple twines off one peg. But it just gives a really nice look, and you can get really quite neat with your stitching, and again a contrasting colour so that it matches. But it just, and then again you've got the cover, so you can't, you know, it's there, but it's nicely hidden, it's nicely presented, so it has a very sort of traditional, professional look. Okay, so that's with the twine. Right. Oh, this is another twine one. See, your book doesn't have to be square. I did this based on a napkin because I've covered it in napkin. Again, you can just make out the twines underneath, that texture of them. Obviously, if you used a flat thread, I mean, I use chunky twine. You could use a thinner twine and then it wouldn't be as pronounced, but I like that sort of definition of it. But that's, you know, it doesn't have to be a square book by any stretch of the imagination. So that's your first one, that's your twine. As well as your twine fittings for your frame, you do have the ribbon ones. Now, I'm going to just set this up with 2 ribbons, so I just need 2 sliders. And it's basically the same setup. You attach your ribbons to the little anchors at the top, they feed through and go underneath. I'm going to use a patterned printed ribbon just because that shows you a couple of things that you might slip up on. So just the same as you do for the twine, is you're going to wrap your ribbon into your little sort of hanger. Now, because the book sits on here to be stitched, if I have got a patterned ribbon and I want that pattern to be seen on the spine of my book, just remember that side there. You'll be seeing the pattern side. When you're working on it, you won't see it. So just remember that, because otherwise if you get it the wrong way round, when you come to finish your book, you'll notice that you can't see your pattern. So again, just line these up. Now, with the ribbon one, because it's wider, you might find that it wobbles, so you can use 2 or 3 pegs to hold that in place. That's the point, I need another peg. That's why you get some extra pegs. So, and looking at that, I've cut excess ribbon again here. You can soon get to be quite frugal with it. So I would always practice with something quite plain to begin with, so you're not using all your good ribbon. Because once you've done a few of these, you can get it down to a fine art on how much ribbon you need. So you can line these up quite close together or spread them out a little bit. Again, just making sure they're fairly even. Also, because the pegs have the point on, I always have the point at the back there so it's not where I'm working. Okay, so again, it has to go through the slot at the back of your base. Okay. And into your anchor here. The ribbon one, in order to support it, it does have some little joining bits, but the ribbon will still go round and go exactly where you want it to go. But it just stops those being too delicate. Okay. Right, into there. I mean, you can anchor this off with a bit of double-sided tape or anything that makes that. You can pull against it so they're nice and tight. So again, they're in place, ready. So again, taking your piercing guide, rubbing off your previous markings. This is why I just do them in pencil. Okay, take your signature and again line your piercing guide up. So I do want a hole at the start and the finish. Now this time with ribbon you want a hole one side and a hole the other. Hole one side, hole the other. Because unlike the twine, which is like a tube that I can do out of the same hole and back in, with this one we're actually going to stitch across the ribbon. So I need 2 holes for each ribbon. Okay, so that's my... And overemphasize these so that you can really see them. You're going to rub them out anyway. Okay, and then grab your cradle if you've got one. It does make piercing holes a lot easier, but you don't have to have one. It just, you know, if you're trying to make things quickly, it's just one of those things that gives you, it's like having an extra pair of hands. And you'll notice that I'm working on the bed of this because it's nice and sturdy. So it will just make sure. Okay, so I'm only going to do, what have I got? 3 signatures, I think. Where did I put my needle? Don't put your needle somewhere safe. I normally stick it in the top of my thread or keep it in your little drawer. Right, so you're piercing those where you marked, and because you're going to use the same markings on each signature, everything's going to end up in the same place. It feels a bit thick. Okay. So just, I'll do 3 just to show you. And the nice thing about working with the ribbon is you can then really play with having decorative stitches. But what you'll find with those is actually that's not done until after the book is stitched. So they all start exactly the same. So I've got 3 of those. Right, put your cradle to one side. I think I'll go with a white thread this time because that might show up nicely for you. Okay. I use a cotton thread, but you can use anything. I mean, if you want to really create an illusion of the book floating, use fishing line that can't be seen. Right. So, line your book up, and you'll see where you've made the holes will fit near the ribbon. So again, we're going to start on the outside, have your hand inside, in the middle of the signature. So start on the outside, possibly cut a bit too much thread there, but that's fine. So you're going to come out by the ribbon. You're going to cross the ribbon, not stitch through it, just cross it and go back in the other side. So it's like a running stitch, okay? And as you come, see, it's capturing that ribbon. Out the next hole, just pulling gently till you feel it get that tension, and in the other side. Okay. Now, unlike the twine, this time we're going to go back in the same signature. So we're going to get a full running stitch going inside. Okay, so we come back out, then we go in. So this time you see every stitch on the outside as well, but it just gives you that opportunity to pull it nice and tight as you're going across those ribbons. Okay, and I say ribbons, these could be lengths of fabric that you've stripped down. That looks really nice, you know. Recycled sari is beautiful on here because you get beautiful colours. Whatever you want, just always make sure you're not going through the ribbon. You want to be able to pull the ribbon through, so to speak. It's not actually stitched through it. Okay, pull that tight. Okay, and then here we're going to capture that one we started with. So I'm going to do a little knot. You can do decorative stitches there, but I'm just going to do a little knot just so that I can then, okay, right, hang on, all fingers and thumbs there. So, and then just like the other one, we're going to come up to our next signature. So we're going to go in, and I'm working at a funny angle. There we go. So in there, keeping your hand. I'm working at a twisted angle so that you can see. Obviously at home, make sure that you're working comfortably with it in front of you. Okay, you don't want to be twisting. And that's just a case of going back, doing exactly the same thing with this one. But the only thing you have to remember, just like we said on the twine one, is that you need to just add an extra little bit of support to the very first and last stitch on each signature. So when I'm coming out of here, I want to make sure that before I go back in, I'm going to just go around that stitch as well. Just help pulls that nice and tight. Okay, and then I'm going to go back the way we came, just like we did. Okay, and you just keep going. Let me just, I do like bookbinding needles because they have nice big eyes, which makes threading them nice and easy. So all the way along. Okay. So just keep repeating. I mean, you can see that it doesn't take long for you to be able to get multiple signatures going here. So again, before, we're just going to secure that to there, and then we're going to come in for the next signature. So that all the time, all the signatures are joined to each other as well as the ribbon, and it just gives you that extra little bit of support. Okay, so you just carry on going along until you've got as many signatures as you want, and then the same thing as before, you unhook your bits. Okay, take that out, and then you see you've got your ribbons. Right, let me just move this out of the way. So you've got your stitches across here. Don't know if you can see that. Let's move some of this junk out of the way so you can see. So your stitches are across there, which obviously, as I have on this one I used a nice shiny metallic thread. I've just left those just as they are. But once you've got those stitches, you can start to have a little play with them. So here, can you see the stitches are across there? What you can do is you can actually take a thread. Let me just take that off there. And you can pick up and pull them tight together and just sort of lash them together, or you can do decorative stitches across. So just by pulling them you get a really nice decorative finish, which is what I did on this teeny tiny one. I've lashed them all together and made a really pretty, almost like a spider's web look, and then you can weave different colours in there. So it gives you those options, but you don't have to worry about it when you're stitching your book. Your stitching is exactly the same. The decorative elements, I mean, you can sort of do two together and, you know, add some beads in. All of that comes afterwards. You don't have to worry about it while you're stitching it. Stitching stays the same all the way across. So that's makes it easier, because you don't have to worry about it at the time. Because if you were wanting to do like a crisscross or something like that, you'd have to remember where you're at. But by doing that afterwards, you know, it gives you that choice. And if you think, oh, you know, say for example you've stitched it and you think they're a little bit loose, those stitches, by doing that little decorative bit on the end, it just helps tighten up those stitches if you haven't. First, certainly on your first few books, where you might think, oh, you can't pull that tight with the thread, but it means you can have a play with it afterwards. And again, you can weave different colours through there, and it just all adds to the spine. And again, I think with the ribbon, it's nice to leave that spine exposed. This one, I kept it very simple. Nice pretty ribbon that you can see there, and you can see all the stitching. And then I've just finished it off with some buttons. This is used, you know, as I say, the recycled sari, and it's got all this lovely stitching exposed, so you can enjoy the beauty of the book. So that's using your ribbon and adding decorative stitches to it. And with those two very simple techniques, you can make endless books. So, you know, and it can be teeny tiny, or it can be big and sort of think you're gothic. I mean, this one is faux leather. It's faux leather bound, but it gives that really nice antique look. So just have fun with it and just create as many books as you want.